There is a very specific, almost clinical, drop in temperature that occurs in the center of your chest when you finally realize you are entirely alone. You scan the room. You look at your colleagues, your family, the people you mistakenly labeled as your friends, and you see the subtle, undeniable shift. The smiles are rigid. They do not reach the eyes. The animated conversations suddenly die the moment you walk through the door. The frequency of the room has mutated. You are no longer a protected member of the tribe. You are the prey. You are the target. This is the exact coordinate where most ordinary men disintegrate. The human animal is hardwired by millions of years of evolution for the safety of the herd. We crave consensus. We beg for the warmth of the collective. And when the pack suddenly turns its teeth toward you, the primitive instinct is to panic, to drop to your knees, to explain yourself, to frantically scramble back into the suffocating, comfortable warmth of the group. Do not do it. Restrain that pathetic urge. If you are feeling the crushing weight of the entire world pressing against your throat right now, it is not a miscalculation. It is an initiation. You have successfully triggered the autoimmune response of the mediocre. You have mutated into a threat. And that simply means you are finally doing something real, something dangerous. Consider Niccolo Machiavelli, the absolute architect of power. He did not write the ultimate manual on human dominance while lounging in a gilded palace. He wrote it in the pitch black of absolute hell. He was exiled, stripped of his identity, accused of treason by the very state he served. He was dragged into a subterranean dungeon and subjected to the strappado, his hands bound behind his back, hoisted high into the damp air by a frayed rope, and violently dropped until the joints in his shoulders tore from their sockets. Everyone was against him: the government, the church, the Medici dynasty, his former allies. They all wanted his spirit broken, but he did not beg. He did not offer a whimpering apology to the mob. He simply walked back to his barren farm, washed the dried blood from his skin, sat in the dead silence of his study, and wrote The Prince. In his absolute isolation, he forged a singular, indestructible Machiavelli key that would unlock an empire of influence, an empire that has comfortably outlived every single face in the crowd that tortured him. You are here because you want to know how to win, when the mathematics of survival say it is impossible. You want the blueprint to reverse the psychological dynamic, so that their venom actually fuels your ascension. I will give you the blueprint. But first, you must violently amputate your desperate childhood need to be liked. Power is not a democratic popularity contest. Power is a ruthless function of physics, and we are going to use the immense gravitational weight of the world to pulverize your enemies and construct your throne. To master this game, you must first dissect the anatomy of your own assassination. Why are they attacking you? You are not being hunted because you are weak. You are being hunted because you have violated the most sacred, unspoken contract of the collective herd, the contract of shared stagnation. Machiavelli understood this psychological friction intimately. He noted that there is absolutely nothing more perilous to conduct, nothing more lethal, than to take the lead in introducing a new order of things. When you decide to elevate yourself, when you start repairing your broken finances, when you sculpt your physical body, when you sharpen your mind, you inadvertently hold up a terrifying, high-definition mirror to the people festering around you. Your sudden growth is a spotlight on their decay. Your iron discipline is a direct, unforgivable insult to their daily laziness. The brutal truth is, they do not actually hate you. They hate the blinding light you are shining on their own monumental failures. This is the classic psychology of the crab bucket. If one crab begins to pull itself up the plastic wall toward freedom, the masses at the bottom do not applaud. They do not cheer for the outlier. They reach up with their claws. They grab the legs of the climber, and they violently drag it back down into the suffocating dark. And if the climber persists, they will break its shell to keep it uniform with the rest. You are the climbing crab, and the fatal error you are making right now is trying to negotiate with the crabs at the bottom of the bucket. You are wasting your breath trying to logically explain your grand vision. You think that if you just use the right words, if they just understood your pure intentions, they would surely support your metamorphosis. Stop talking. They understand your intentions perfectly, and that is exactly why they are trying to destroy you. To secure your victory, You must immediately rewire how you perceive their opposition. Stop viewing their betrayal as an emotional tragedy. View it coldly. View it as a navigational coordinate. If you were walking in the wrong direction, back toward mediocrity, they would be completely comfortable with you. They would offer you a drink and a smile. The fact that they are agitated, whispering, and plotting is your ultimate confirmation. You are operating on the vector of the outlier. The intense social friction you feel is simply the aerodynamic price of your new velocity. Accept this cold equation. You cannot pack them into your suitcase and take them to the summit. The herd is biologically programmed to move at the sluggish speed of its weakest, most fearful member. The apex predator, however, moves only at the speed of his hunger. You must decide, right in this very second, which one you are. When the entire world mobilizes against you, your primal, unevolved instinct is to make noise. You want to shout into the wind. You want to vigorously defend your name. You want to drag them into a room and set the record straight with absolute logic. This is a fatal, psychological trap. The moment you open your mouth to argue with a synchronized mob, you instantly validate their illusion of power. You broadcast a glaring signal that their collective opinion possesses the devastating ability to disturb your internal baseline. You are taking your most precious, finite resource, your life force, your mental bandwidth, and bleeding it directly into a black hole of their amusement. You are fighting on their terrain, and in the art of war, the commander who fights on the enemy's chosen battlefield has already lost the campaign. Machiavelli constructed a completely different, infinitely more terrifying architecture for this exact scenario. When the Medici family violently expelled him from Florence, when they stripped him of everything, he did not stand in the public piazza, screaming like a lunatic about universal injustice. He vanished, completely. He retreated into the absolute shadow of his remote farm. He went deadly silent. This is the strategy of the void, when every single person is aiming a rifle at you. The most brilliant tactical maneuver is not to fire back. It is to permanently remove the target. You must become a ghost. You must ruthlessly withdraw your physical presence, your digital voice, and your energetic signature. Shut down the supply line. This execution achieves two masterstrokes of dark psychology. First, it starves the inferno. Gossip, coordinated hatred, and social opposition are parasites. They require the oxygen of your reaction to survive. They need your dramatic emotional outbursts. They feed on your desperate explanations. When you hand them absolutely nothing, when you feed them a diet of cold, suffocating silence, they are left with nothing to burn. Deprived of their primary prey, the mob's energy turns cannibalistic. They will inevitably turn their teeth on each other. Second, the void creates a towering myth. While you are silent, you are not paralyzed. You are not crying in a corner. You are meticulously working. You are building an empire in the pitch black, where they cannot see your blueprints. Imagine, for a fraction of a second, the profound psychological terror you inflict on an adversary who launches a massive, coordinated strike against you and receives absolutely nothing in return. No explosive anger, no predictable sadness, no frantic rebuttal, just a chilling, blank stare, followed by a total, unexplained absence. The human brain despises an information vacuum. They will start to desperately fill that void with their own creeping insecurities. They will start to whisper, "What does he know that we do not? Why is he not terrified of us? What exactly is he planning in the dark?" The heavy, crushing weight of paranoia instantly shifts from your shoulders, directly onto theirs. You have weaponized their own imagination against them. You must utilize this period of forced isolation. The void is not an empty, tragic space. It is a high-temperature forge, when you are entirely alone, violently stripped of all your so-called allies. You are given the rare, beautiful opportunity to discover if you actually have a spine. You are forced to stop looking outward for cheap validation. Because the theater is completely empty, you learn to self-source your absolute power. You become the generator. Look at the calculated trajectory of the artist known as 50 Cent. When he was completely blackballed by the corporate music industry, when he was physically shattered, shot 9 separate times, when every single major label locked their doors and refused to sign him, he did not write pathetic letters of complaint. He did not beg for a second chance. He retreated to the subterranean basement. He recorded raw, unfiltered mixtapes. He bypassed the gatekeepers entirely and flooded the streets with undeniable product, not empty promises. He quietly built an organic, fanatical army in the shadows. Long before the bloated industry executives even realized he had returned, by the time they finally recognized the magnitude of the threat, it was too late. He was already the undisputed king of the board. If they have exiled you from their pathetic little group, good, smile at them. They have just locked you in a pressure chamber with your own limitless potential. Do not dare unlock that door and come out until you have mutated into an absolute monster. But there will be certain strategic environments where you physically cannot disappear. You are trapped in the corporate office with the very managers who are actively plotting to fire you. You are sleeping under the same roof with family members who deeply resent your ambition. You are marooned deep inside hostile territory. Here, you must deploy Machiavelli's most dangerous, most deceptive lesson. You must flawlessly conceal your true intentions. In his discourses, Machiavelli resurrects the ancient story of Lucius Brutus. The tyrannical king had brutally murdered Brutus's father and his brother. Brutus was scheduled to be next. Everyone in the kingdom was against him. He held absolutely zero political power. If he had drawn a sword and fought back, he would have been slaughtered in seconds. If he had attempted to run, he would have been hunted down by dogs. So, Brutus executed a masterclass in psychological camouflage. He enthusiastically played the role of the village idiot. He pretended to be mentally slow. He acted highly submissive, uniquely clumsy, and completely harmless. He allowed the arrogant king to publicly mock him. He let the royal court laugh at his expense. He purposefully lowered his status so drastically that he became entirely invisible to their radar. He was no longer classified as a human threat. He was just a pathetic, entertaining pet. But behind the vacant, drooling mask of the idiot, Brutus was hyper-vigilant. His eyes were wide open. He was systematically memorizing every single one of the king's structural weaknesses. He was patiently calculating the exact trajectory of the political winds, waiting in the shadows for the precise moment of maximum instability. And when that golden moment finally arrived, when the public outrage reached a boiling point, the stuttering idiot Brutus calmly dropped the mask. He drew his hidden blade and flawlessly led the bloody revolution that permanently overthrew the monarchy. He secured the ultimate victory, precisely because he was entirely willing to look like an absolute loser in the short term. The author Robert Greene classifies this under Law 38. Think exactly as you like, but behave like the others. When the entire room is vibrating with hostility against you, do not proudly wear your grand ambition on your sleeve. Your ambition is a neon target. You must actively camouflage yourself in their comforting mediocrity. If your insecure boss secretly hates you, do not violently outshine him just yet. Nod your head, agree with his mundane opinions, feed his starving ego, make him feel exceptionally secure and brilliant. If your family mocks your new business venture, look them dead in the eye and agree. Tell them, you are entirely right. It is just a silly little hobby to pass the time. I am not expecting much to come of it. You must purposefully lower their defensive guard. You must manipulate them into sheathing their sharpened knives by completely convincing them that you are already a defeated, broken entity. There is a profound, icy arrogance in this specific strategy. You are looking directly into their eyes, smiling a warm, genuine smile, and thinking to yourself, I am currently acting in a low-budget play, specifically designed for your entertainment, and you are far too blind and arrogant to even see the strings. This is not a display of cowardice. Let me be perfectly clear. This is high-level espionage. You are a sleeper agent operating deep behind enemy lines. Your only directives are to silently gather actionable intelligence, violently hoard your resources, and wait patiently for the exact second their soft back is turned. The hunter's arrow never screams before it leaves the bow. Neither should you. The modern philosopher Nassim Taleb, an architect of Machiavellian realism, introduced a concept that you must tattoo on your brain, the concept of anti-fragility. He observed that there are three categories of matter in this chaotic universe. First, the fragile, things that shatter instantly under the slightest pressure, a porcelain mask, a weak ego. Second, the robust, things that merely survive the pressure but remain entirely unchanged, a dead stone. And then, There is the anti-fragile, the biological anomalies that actually absorb trauma and convert it into terrifying strength. The mythical Hydra, sever one head, and two more aggressive ones immediately tear through the flesh to replace it. Human muscle tearing under iron, only to rebuild denser and more violent. When the entire room is conspiring against you, mere survival is a pathetic, cowardly goal. You must stop trying to be a robust rock holding its ground. You must mutate. You must become completely anti-fragile. How do you execute this? You must violently strip the emotional sting out of their attacks. You must stop behaving like a wounded victim and start acting like a cold, calculating machine processing raw data. Here is the brutal truth of dark psychology. Your friends will constantly lie to your face to protect your delicate feelings, but your enemies, they are your most valuable, unpaid auditors. They will hand you the exact coordinates of your deepest vulnerabilities because their only goal is to draw blood. Every time they whisper an insult, they are revealing a critical flaw in your armor. They call you arrogant. That is a massive intelligence failure on your part. You must learn to mask your pride more effectively. They mock your lack of competence. Excellent. That is a tactical directive to secretly master that specific domain while they sleep. They laugh at your bank account. That is not an insult. That is a mathematical correction. You must redirect all your bandwidth to ruthless cash flow. Machiavelli instructed that the ultimate prince must possess the mind of the fox to instantly recognize the hidden traps in the grass and the sheer physical terror of the lion to shatter the skulls of the circling wolves. Right now, your enemies are generously mapping out the entire minefield for you. Let them do the work. Furthermore, being socially isolated and actively hunted creates a psychological pressure cooker. This is a forced evolutionary mechanism. If they had left you alone, comfortable and accepted, you would have grown dangerously fat, lazy, and utterly irrelevant. The undeniable biological fact that they are hunting you means you are forced to become infinitely faster, infinitely more calculating, and brutally sharp, simply to stay breathing. They are unwittingly forcing you to become an elite predator. You should silently thank them. Without the chaotic violence of the Joker, Batman is nothing more than a bored, depressed billionaire playing dress-up. The opposition physically manufactures the outlier. The villain carves the hero out of stone. Look at the historical anatomy of Apple. When Steve Jobs was violently ousted from his own creation, betrayed by his hand-picked board of directors and the entire industry, he did not retreat to a quiet island to lick his wounds. The wilderness years did not break his spirit. They hardened his operational psychology. He built Next. He acquired Pixar. He mastered the dark art of corporate leverage. By the time he returned to Apple, he was no longer the naive founder. He was an apex predator, capable of building the most terrifying monopoly on the planet. Had they kept him comfortable in 1985, his arrogance would have destroyed him. Their betrayal was his ultimate salvation. When the tribe permanently rejects you, you are forced to confront a freezing, terrifying reality. Absolutely no one is coming to save you. In the fictional movies, the cavalry always arrives just in time. In the brutal reality of this world, you are the cavalry. Machiavelli explicitly warned against using auxiliary forces and relying on mercenaries or borrowed power. If your hired allies lose the battle, you are completely annihilated. If they win, you instantly become their hostage. You simply trade one abusive master for a slightly more powerful one. This period of forced isolation is your masterclass in total sovereignty. You must secure financial autonomy, a capital that is entirely immune to the whims of a manager who despises you. You must forge emotional autonomy, a psychological fortress that does not crack when a partner fundamentally misunderstands your grand vision. You must cultivate intellectual autonomy, ideas that you have violently stress-tested yourself, not simply downloaded from the programmed collective. Think deeply about the mechanics of your pain. Why does their opposition actually hurt you? It is a simple mathematical equation. It hurts because you still desperately need a resource they control: their validation, their capital, their permission, their love. Identify the invisible leash, then take a psychological blade and sever it completely. The very second, you can look into the eyes of the coordinated mob and say, with absolute, chilling sincerity, "I do not need a single drop of your blood to survive. You have won the war. You are a free man, and a truly free man is the most dangerous entity on earth to a population of predictable slaves. You look at the people aligned against you, and you hallucinate a solid, impenetrable wall of hatred, a totally united front. This is a cognitive illusion. Machiavelli understood that no human group is ever truly united. They are held together by fragile, temporary self-interests, and, currently, by the convenient glue of a common target. You. The second you execute the strategy of the void, withdrawing yourself as the bleeding target, that cheap glue begins to dissolve. Without your reaction to feed on, the internal fractures immediately appear. Your strategic objective is never to punch the solid wall. Your objective is to patiently locate the single loose brick. In the mechanics of power, you must keep your enemies divided. Do not launch a frontal assault on a toxic department or a hostile family gathering. Scan the perimeter. Identify the absolute weakest link in their chain. There is always one coward in the pack who is simply nodding along out of pure fear of being the next target. One subordinate who secretly despises the leader of the mob. Approach this weak link in total secrecy. Not to argue, not to threaten, but to gently confide. Lower your voice and say, "I know the rest of them are entirely blind to the reality, but I always knew you were different. You are the only one here who actually possesses the intellect to see the grand scheme." Inject a lethal dose of flattery straight into their starving ego. Plant a tiny, invisible seed of doubt. Tell them, "I heard the leader mocking your performance last week. But do not worry, I defended your honor." You do not even need to invent a lie. You simply need to apply a magnifying glass to the friction that already exists. When you successfully turn just one piece on the board, you shatter their fragile consensus. Suddenly, the mob is no longer an absolute force. Paranoia infects their ranks. They start looking over their own shoulders. And while they are consumed by internal sabotage and cannibalism, they completely forget about you. You have successfully introduced a terminal virus into their operating system. You have dismantled an entire army without firing a single piece of ammunition. Revenge is a deeply flawed, primitive biological instinct. When a lesser entity inflicts pain upon you, your unevolved neurological software screams for immediate, messy retaliation. You want to expose their hypocrisy. You want to scream into their faces. You want to inflict symmetrical damage. Suppress that pathetic animal urge immediately. It is sloppy, it is emotionally expensive, and strategically, it almost always backfires. If you launch a direct, emotional counterattack, you instantly hand them a perfectly packaged narrative. You prove their point. They will point their fingers and whisper, "Look at him. He is unstable. He is toxic. We were absolutely right to completely exclude him." The only form of revenge that Machiavelli would ever authorize, the only retaliation that actually alters the fabric of reality, is total, undeniable, mathematical victory. In advanced military doctrine, there is a terrifying concept known as overmatch. Overmatch is not about winning a tight battle. It is about possessing a destructive capability so overwhelmingly catastrophic that the enemy instantly realizes the absolute futility of even drawing their weapon. You do not fight them. You build an architecture of existence that is so undeniably superior to their rotting lives that their petty opinions of you become a cosmic joke. Consider the hierarchy of nature. Does an apex lion ever lose a single second of sleep, wondering if a trembling sheep approves of his hunting technique? Absolutely not. The gap in sheer power is far too wide for the sheep's vocal cords to even register. Your only directive right now is to violently widen that gap. While they are wasting their finite lifespans, gossiping in the same dark bars, complaining about the exact same mundane managers every single Friday, you are submerged in the trenches. You are building leverage. While their physical bodies are slowly deteriorating, you are forging iron. This is the Count of Monte Cristo strategy. When Edmond Dantes was falsely imprisoned, erased from society, and thrown into a subterranean black hole, he did not waste his breath screaming at the stone walls. He utilized the absolute darkness. He aggressively educated his mind. He located the hidden capital. He completely assassinated his former, weaker self, and reinvented his entire operating system as the Count. When he finally stepped back into the light, he did not engage in petty street fights with the men who betrayed him. He quietly purchased their banks. He systematically acquired their darkest secrets. He ruthlessly dismantled the very foundations of their pathetic lives. And he did it all with a warm, chilling smile. You must become the count. Let the mediocre masses enjoy their tiny, insignificant victories today. Let them win the meaningless office politics. You are playing a completely different, multi-decade game. 6 months of violent, absolute focus, of total sensory deprivation from their noise, will launch you 5 entire years ahead of the average, sleepwalking human. Imagine the psychological trauma you will inflict when you reappear 1 year from now. A new physical architecture, a new tax bracket, a completely foreign, untouchable aura. And when they attempt to speak to you, you treat them with a cold, polite, clinical indifference. That absolute lack of emotional reaction will shatter their egos far more effectively than a physical blow to the jaw. It proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that their massive, coordinated opposition did not even cause a microscopic dent in your armor. There is one final, permanent, psychological mutation you must undergo. You must completely eradicate the weak desire for an easy life. You must adopt the ancient philosophy of amor fati, the absolute love of your brutal fate, not merely tolerating the attacks, but greedily devouring them as the raw, combustible fuel for your own supremacy. If the entire grid is mobilized against you, the universe is conducting a high-level audit of your soul. It is the ultimate compliment. A skilled pilot does not curse the violent headwind that strikes the nose of his aircraft during takeoff. He strategically angles the machine and uses that exact aerodynamic resistance to generate massive vertical lift. Without the violence of the opposing wind, the heavy machine can never leave the concrete. Your enemies are your wind. Every single time they whisper that you will fail, they are handing you the high-octane fuel to build your empire. Machiavelli was violently stripped of his diplomatic credentials. If he had remained comfortable in the bureaucracy of Florence, his name would have been erased by time. Because they viciously destroyed his career, they inadvertently forged the ultimate philosopher of power. They manufactured their own immortal nightmare. When you view your adversaries through this clinical lens, you permanently kill the victim inside of you. You become an alchemist. They throw heavy, toxic lead at your head, and you coldly melt it down into gold. Eventually, the mathematics of power dictate that the tide will turn. When you successfully survive the brutal winter, when your empire generates undeniable gravity, the exact same cowards who plotted your execution will slowly begin to drift back into your orbit. They will smile and say, "I always knew you possessed the talent. We were just deeply worried about your trajectory. Hey, do you think you could help me with a favor?" They will desperately attempt to rewrite historical reality. This is your final, defining test of sovereignty. Do not let them inside the gates. Machiavelli explicitly warned that men are painfully simple creatures, bound only by their present, desperate necessities. They will flatter the king they once tried to hang. Forgiveness is a fine concept for lowering your own blood pressure. Holding on to burning anger is drinking poison, but you must never, ever suffer from amnesia. You must establish a draconian, permanent law of access. Those very few who stood shoulder to shoulder with you in the freezing mud, they are granted a permanent seat at the high table. Those who enthusiastically held the shovels, actively trying to bury you alive, they can freeze outside the towering walls of your fortress forever. You are not being cruel. You are simply acting as the ruthless curator of your own reality. You have learned through blood that loyalty is a statistical anomaly. Most humans are fair-weather parasites who only worship the sun. But you have become the storm. Keep your inner circle microscopically small. Keep your grand strategies heavily classified. And never, for a fraction of a second, apologize for the titanium boundaries you constructed while you were fighting for your life in the dark. Winning when the world is against you is not a tragedy. It is the ultimate initiation. Life looked you dead in the eye and asked, "Do you possess the sheer, terrifying willpower to stand entirely alone?" The masses fold. They apologize to the mob. They slowly walk back into the slaughterhouse and die as cheap, forgotten copies. But you used the silence. You weaponized the dark. You built a fortress so towering, so mathematically perfect, that their primitive arrows simply fall back to the earth. And as you look down from those parapets at the tiny, irrelevant crowd that once tried to break you, you will not feel a single drop of anger. You will only feel the cold, quiet, absolute certainty of the outlier. That is the only victory that actually exists. If this transmission shifted your reality, understand that this is merely the shallow water, the true architecture of human manipulation. The deepest, most dangerous applications of dark psychology cannot survive in the public square. The system actively suppresses the most lethal strategies. If you want to unlock the absolute, uncensored mechanics of power, you must acquire the Machiavelli Key. Step out of the crowd, step into the architect level. The gates are open, but only for those who are no longer afraid of the dark.